All right, so now just looking at the documentary and kind of reflecting on it, when Elle asked me to moderate the panel, one of the things that we wanted to kind of think through was how culture impacts all of our stories. As you can see here, there are a variety of different experiences, different stories, journeys to coming here in the present. And so I'd like to take a moment for everybody to kind of just talk through what their first generation experience has been like being here in the United States. Simon, if you want to kick it off, be great.
Yeah, thank you. I moved to the US in June 2010, and I had no idea what I was, getting myself into. And the reason I moved to the US was because of a woman, And my wife is white, and she and I met in Liberia. I used to be the field director for a large non-profit organization, so I worked in about 6 different countries. And so June is a nice time to come to Seattle, and I thought it would always be like that. But by December, I was ready to take off. The snow was coming down and all that stuff. But now that I'm a father of 2 kids, I've worked at so many jobs. Some jobs have been terminated the day that I'm performing the best, and the stats show it. And, I've become more confused than amazing at what's going on in the US. But I think the biggest thing for me is that this is the only place where it's a melting pot. It's the only place where you can work with a Chinese person and learn Chinese. You turn around, there is a Japanese. You can have a neighbor that is from Israel, another one is from Palestine. So, there's nowhere in the world where it's like that. So for me, I've always asked, why did I end up here? So I always just try to find that purpose, and I feel like it's bigger than one vibe. It's bigger than the jobs I have, and so I'm here to really make an impact and and leave a legacy that is beyond what everybody has heard tonight or seen about one vibe. So, everybody has a voice, and there is enough for everybody in this world. And so I believe there's enough for me as well. There's enough for my community as well. So my thing is, how can we empower each other? How can we collaborate so that we all ensure that the peace that belongs to each of us, we cherish it and we enjoy it every day, Yes.
That's awesome. Cardo?
What's the question again?
Just thinking about...
I'm messing with you. Hey, so my story is I guess really simple. Most of you would look at me and think that I was probably born here in Seattle or New York or somewhere in the US, but I was actually born in Costa Rica. Yo soy latinoamericano y nací en Costa Rica. Yo hablo mucho español. But it's interesting because when I came to America, not by choice. My mom and sisters moved to the US because it's the land of opportunity, right? I think of the old West Side Story thing, and a lot of you might be a little young for that, but there's a song in there that says, I like to be in America. Okay, by me in America.
Sing the whole thing.
Oh no, right? But but the idea is that America is the land of opportunity, right? And when I travel outside of this country, and I do quite a bit, I go home a lot, and I just reflect on how good we have it here, right? And I don't know if Americans understand how good it is in this country with all the things that are negative, with all the challenges that we face here. This is a great country. So I didn't have a choice. I came here as a kid from Costa Rica right into the middle of Manhattan. So I go from my grandmother's farm. I go from, chickens being, running around and horses and cows to the concrete jungle of Manhattan, right? And the thing that's amazing about children, right, as a kid is that you adapt, right? I didn't go, oh, woe is me, this is horrible, right? I'm just like, whoa, right? And so I adapted to being here in America and being in New York. But I've kept my culture and my roots, and it's been interesting for me because, again, when most people look at me, they see African American, a black guy, and that's as deep as it goes. And for a long time, I struggled with identity, right? It's like, okay, I don't feel the same about certain things, right? In Latin culture, you don't joke about your mama, right? In Black American culture, there's all these mama jokes, right? And so I'm hanging with these cats, and they're telling these mama jokes, and I'm not laughing, right? It's like, what's wrong with you, right? And I wondered, what's wrong with me, right? But the cool thing is, and shout out to anyone who went to Evergreen State College. I went down to Evergreen and met Joy Hardiman, Dr. Maxine Mims, just a bunch of folks who were all about culture and all about, helping you get grounded and find your roots, right? So that you can be productive, right? And they challenged me. They were like, hey, why don't you go to Costa Rica, spend a summer, journal, write, and you'll get credit for it, right? Which is great. And that's what I did. I went home and really just found my roots, and then came back, and I think I've been a pretty productive member of our society. Elle might think different, but since, right? So what fascinates me about what you guys have done with Madaraka is the idea of culture and community, right? Because when I think of community, I think of folks working together, right? When I think of culture, I think of kind of they're juxtaposed, right? Because culture is really about your culture, this culture, and they're very different, right? But then when you put them together, right? I mean, you've got a community and culture. I won't philosophize anymore, but that's just something that I hope we touch on here tonight is just community and culture and how they interact and how they interact to make a difference, to make a better world for us all.
You could still sing. I won't be too long. I think culture really comes from my household more than anything else. When we left Lebanon, a lot of it was because of war, opportunity. We had family in America, the land of the free. My brother's back there with the big beard. He came here first, and then he went back to Lebanon, and then we all came as a family. And when I say classic story, it was we were on the dock and climbed onto the ship and sat in a very, very small room. My mom pregnant with 3 kids and my dad, and we came to this country. But the reason why I think culture means so much to us is because of how we communicated it in our home. We spoke Arabic, and we continued to push ourselves and to understand what was going on. And regardless of all the craziness that you'll hear in the Middle East, we had satellite TV, so we would see all the Arabic news, and it's just constant negativity. But a lot of it's just propaganda. And through my growth, I really understood what that meant. And when I went to Kenya to take all these shots, and you have to do all of this, and I was like, why are we doing all of this, right? It makes you feel like it probably scares a lot of people to not go, right? And those questions and those constant questions that push us to really think differently and not be bound by others' perspectives and other rules, to push and really understand who we are and who we can be. I think that's a really big part of what culture is. And when I see a lot of family, who wear traditional garb, I love that, because sometimes we'll joke about it, but I love that because that's who we are. And I think culture is that driving force.
That's beautiful. So Ricardo, kind of going back to what you were talking about the intersection between culture and community. You were raised out there in the concrete jungle of New York, right? What was that like, you know what I mean, being a, Black Latino kid that's being raised in the concrete jungle, and how did you see yourself, you know what I mean, dealing with that identity as you went into Evergreen State? And, what was the kind of like the defining moment, or the moment where you realized, like, okay, I get it now?
Well, growing up in New York, New York's an interesting place. I know many of you have been there. Interesting in that it is truly a melting pot, right? You've got folks, as you were mentioning, Simon, from all over that are just placed in my block, right? I don't know if you understand what a block is, right? I mean, people literally live on their block, right? So a block can contain, I don't know, 20,000 people, right? I mean, it's not, it's a lot of folks, right? Because you've got these tenements, you've got these skyscrapers, and people live, 30, 40, 50 stories up. And then, in each floor, you might have 10 apartments. And, within each apartment, you might have 10, 15 people living in each apartment. So New York is a place that forces you to deal with differences. It forces you to deal with different cultures, right? And you have to. There's no way around it, right? And so being plugged into that, right? Again, as a kid, I say kids adapt quicker than adults. There was Jose. There was Jonathan. There's the Jewish guy. But these are just people. They're just kids. And I'm just hanging. I'm just learning that. As I got older, though, the idea of who I am and my place in the world became more important. As a kid, it's fun. You're playing stickball, you're playing handball, you're playing hide and seek, you're playing basketball, you're doing these things. So you're not really concerned with the things that you get concerned with as you go into adulthood. And so as I got into adulthood, then it became important for me to understand, okay, what am I going to be doing? What job am I going to take? What's my place in the world? How can I impact this? What does it mean? I mean, all these things I started asking myself, as we should, as we mature. And so that's what led me to go, okay, well, yeah, you're not the same as these guys you're hanging out with, right? You don't feel the same about certain things, right? You speak with your hands, right? I talk with my hands, right? And that can be weird, right? But that's a cultural thing, right? And some people are offended when you do that. It's like, oh, no, I'm not going to hit you. I'm sorry. I'm just talking with my hands, right? So I noticed all these things that were different about myself, and that led me, as it should, on a path to question who I was, who I am, where I came from, what does it mean? And then hooking up with the folks at Evergreen, they encourage that, right? Yeah, you are from a different culture. And it was like, oh, yeah, okay. Well, what does that look like? Go and see how the people interact, right? See how the men treat their women. See what they eat, right? And so it led me to explore all of those things. And again, it's all very positive because I understood where I came from. I understood my culture. And then I could see how, again, being placed in a melting pot with a lot of folks, how I was different, but again, to community, I had to participate in this overall community, right? And community is really about how you make things better for everyone within your community or on your block or in your neighborhood and so on and so forth. So it really just forced me to understand my individualism, but as it relates to the bigger culture. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but that's
No, I think you are.
That's kind of where I went.
I think, I can understand exactly how that goes, man. I mean, you're talking about this idea around having a identity that is tied into the greater, larger community and society. Now, Simon, today or this month is Women's History Month, and I think that this documentary does a really great job of paying homage to your mother. I mean, one of the things that you directly touched on was how your mother was the most powerful person that you knew. Talk to us a little bit about how that had a lasting impact, both in your understanding of yourself as well as your understanding of the women who have helped cultivate and contribute to both the success that you've had as well as the person that you have become.
Thank you very much. I want to give a shout out real quick to a pioneer hip hop artist from Kenya, Kamau Ngigi. Thank you for coming tonight. He's one of the people that started rapping in Kiswahili before rap ever left New York. These are the people that were watching what was going on and turning it into local languages. So it's a privilege for him to be here. My mom was a second wife in a polygamist marriage. And she was married when she was 16. My dad was 20 years older than her. So, when you're married in my culture, you live and go where your husband's home is. And as a second wife, she was basically the house help. She would take the older wife's kids to school and just take care of everything. But she was also very independent and very rebellious and very entrepreneurial. So she said, okay, I'll do everything that the culture and the marriage expects me to do as long as I can finish my education, because I got married before finishing my education. So my dad thought she was not serious and said yes, and she held him accountable, and when he could not keep up with her level of accountability, she was like, no problem. I'm going to find myself my own house. I'm going to pay for me, my education, and I'm still going to do all these cultural things. I'm going to take care of all the kids from the first wife. I'll do everything. And so for her to take the courage to move from our rural home and move to Manyata slum, it was a dangerous move, and she wanted to go to school, and then she got herself a job, and then she started a business. She was selling rice and beans and cereal along the road right in front of our home. And that grew from a small-scale business to a distribution company. We were distributing milk and bread in that entire neighborhood you are watching on the documentary. And so by the time I was 8 years old, I was already earning commission from her business. I was being paid, And one of the reasons why I believe she's one of the most powerful women is that, she never told me that you should be a doctor or a teacher or this or that. She just always told me that you're going to be a very important person, And so in my entire life, I've always believed, and I've not let anybody tell me what I should be. I've always known that I'm now that important person that I was supposed to be. And I just continue having integrity and staying focused. But, looking at how I treat my girls now, I have 2 girls. It's
going to have 3.
Yes.
Oh man, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. My youngest sister was asking me recently that, how are you doing this? A lot of your friends are always sharing with me that they have no idea how you're doing One Vibe, working full time, being a dad for 2 girls, staying healthy. How are you doing it? Then I said, I'm an important person, and this is important to me. So then she dropped it, And so for me, I also want to go back to a recent statement by, a friend of mine who was saying, if you want to succeed in life, listen to the women in your life, And so I listened to what my mom used to say, She always said, you're going to be an important person. And so even when I was distributing milk and bread in our neighborhood, I had an entire zone that was mine. I would do it as an important person. You know, I work at a logistics company, and you know, for like 2 years, the company has been trying to send me to Kenya to open an office for them. So I'm paid by the office in Dubai, and I work directly with the regional vice president for the organization who is based in Dubai. And a lot of the time when I'm on a call with him, he says, "You're behaving like a leader. You know, why don't you just, you know, focus on the basics for now?" Then I say, I'm focusing on the basics, but I'm an important person and I have to show up. I don't just want to, you know, I don't want to play around when I get there. My presence and how I show up at work should signify who I want to be. And so I don't need to wait for a title. I don't need to wait for my salary to increase, because I know that I'm an important person right now. So that's what the women in my life have given to me.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. Can we give another round of applause for that? That's absolutely incredible. Now, Elle, one thing that Simon touched on is, you know, having the women in your life that have contributed to, you know, your understanding of self, right? From all accounts, Simon, it sounds like your mother was the first person that believed in you. Talk to us a little bit about what that journey has been like with your mom, because I personally know her and she's one of the best people that I know, and how that has transitioned you into, you know, being the man that we know here today.
My brother's here. I don't know. I'm going to get judged. I was joking. I'm kidding. Honestly, I certainly agree with a lot of the points that Simon made. I think women of culture, especially women of culture, hold a crown in the house and hold a place and a position and a significance that you can't even explain in words. So there's a lot of things when it comes to compassion and love and work ethic that my mom has shown us on a day-to-day. That's, you know, from catering food, as you guys know, you've tried my mom's amazing Lebanese food, from catering food to the work that she does as a makeup artist to, you know, constantly checking in. And, you know, it's funny that you're asking this question, so I'm just kind of like really reflecting, is because we've been talking about my mom for the last few days, but she's provided us with a support system and an ability to have a moment and step back and not just understand who we are as human beings, but who we are in our culture and how we need to continue to represent who we are to the our close-knit community and the greater community. And by doing that in our home and by empowering us, by by giving that compassion, that love to others that who know us, has really, I think, supported our evolution, our growth as people, as individuals who continue to give back. You know, it's actually been interesting in kind of doing the work that I've done with One Vibe, being in Kenya. That first time I went to Kenya was the first time I've been in Lebanon in 27 years. And so while I was getting ready to go there and while I was there, my mom's texting the whole family, be here at this time and do this at this. And she's literally controlling the family in Lebanon from WhatsApp in her little room in Everett, Washington. And so it just goes to show how much passion she has for her children. And that to me has really kind of translated into the work that I want to continue to do for my community. And so what I've learned for One Vibe and the work that I do with Simon and you know, although Ricardo has a scarf on, he really is also an important guy. No, but Ricardo has taught me a lot about community, about how to give back and how to listen. Really kind of like the logistics of a community, the logistics of an organization. And soon I would like to start a nonprofit in Lebanon as well. And it pays homage to the women and my mother and my brothers and the family and the people that we want to continue to be, and we want our people to continue to be.
Just wanted to add a little bit to what Elle is saying, that, you know, if you want to know anybody, and why, people have certain characters. You should know their mothers. One of the things that is amazing about El and his mom and their entire family is that the moment El stepped in and said, I'm going to Kenya, I'm going to support One Vibe, the whole family was behind him. And, when I went for his birthday a few years ago, I was embraced by everybody, for like 15 minutes. I was just with your dad outside, just chatting and vibing. And I had an uncle who smoked like him, and we were just talking, and I was like, wow, this is a cool guy. So every time I call him, before we start talking about work, I'm like, how is your mom? How is your dad? How is this person? And he's like, can we talk about business? So, seeing them reminds me a lot about my own family, and a few people like Njuguna who have been to Kenya can attest to this. Like, my family is like a battalion of the army. The moment I say my friend is coming from Seattle, people are like at the airport, people are like on high alert, So it's amazing what women can do to train their children. So for the women in the house here tonight, you're very, very much appreciated. And, it's difficult. For 3 weeks, last month, I was with my kids by myself, most of these 3 weeks. And, in America, raising children is different. You're alone, You don't have an aunt or a neighbor that you can live with your kids. It's solo. And I felt the weight that women here face. Women in Africa face difficulty, but when it comes to upbringing, the community helps children. Growing up, I would leave our house on Friday after school, and I would come back on Sunday night. My mom would not ask me, where have you been? What were you eating? Where were you staying? And I would just be playing soccer from one tournament to another, and I would be sleeping with friends who belong to those teams. But here, even my wife, calls me, when are you coming home? Because people are so worried about each other here. It's one of those things that I'm learning to adjust to. In Africa, there's really a lot of freedom. You can go and nobody even calls you, Until you show up, people are like, oh, where have you been? That's when they want to know. Anyway.
Yeah. So, Ricardo, just talking, just kind of wrapping up the last question here. Now, when we talk about culture on a macro level, right? You are somebody that has impacted this city in more ways than one. Your work with Sir Mix-a-Lot, your work with Zachy Rose, Seattle Theater Group, STG. Talk to us a little bit about how that work, right, impacts both the community here locally here in Seattle, nationally in the United States, and then also how it also impacts our culture as people of color, as first-generation immigrants, as people who are really trying to do something that is revolutionary just by being here.
Before I got here, I just wrote a couple of things down, and as it relates to community, I wrote that community really essentially brings us together. It's what we commonly share. And in thinking about culture, I wrote that culture is what defines us as different from others, right? The beautiful thing about this, though, from my perspective, is and my work with STG, Seattle Theater Group. It's about the arts. It's about kids. It's about people with Parkinson's, and it's about making a difference overall. But the thing that I love about culture is if you embrace culture that's not your own, right? What does it do for you? Right? Think about that. What does it do for you if you embrace a culture that's not your own? Well, what it should do, right? And what we know from studies is that when you put a group of diverse people in any business, when you put a group of diverse people together in a room to solve a problem, they will solve that problem at a rate and in a way that is better and more productive than when you have a group of the same people. So if you have a group of white folks here, you've got a group of black folks here who are just within their own culture, and then you have a group here where you've got it intermixed. This group outpaces every time those groups that are separate and apart, right? And so for me, the work that I do in Seattle, and I just work behind the scenes, right? Most of you probably don't even know who I am or know my name, but the reward is that I know that the work that I'm doing with the Seattle Theater Group, the work I've done with the Arts Commission, the work I've done with Fort Culture, which takes your hotel motel taxes and supports artists and arts organizations, the work that I do with the Western States Art Federation out of Denver, which takes the National Endowment for the Arts monies and again supports the arts in the 13 Western states, including support for housing, insurance, displays, that sort of thing. I mean, that work I know makes a difference, and it makes a difference because we see it in the people that it affects, right? And when you do NEO work, if any of you work with the National Endowment for the Arts, one of their things is like, let's track how these monies are being spent and the impact it has in those places that the monies are being spent, right? So when you look at those stats, you see the impact that the work that I do, not by myself, but in conjunction with a ton of amazing people who care and who are here to serve, right? Because you've got people who are on this earth and they serve tirelessly, they serve unselfishly, right? And then you have people who it's like, look, I'm all about the Benjamins, man. I'm gonna get my money, right? I'm gonna get this new condo, this new house, right? And so I take my hat off to teachers, right? I take my hat off to those people who give, right? And give of themselves when they don't have to, right? And I am just a part of that bigger ecosystem of folks, like all of us here, and I'm sure like many of you who give, because it's in your heart to give, and you're about a better society, you're about a better future, you're about, what's to come 10, 20, 100 years from now. You care about the environment, you care about the kids, you care about the air that we breathe, you care, right? And I don't know if you can teach that to folks, right? Sometimes I think people are just wired that way, right? And so I'm just a part of that, and I'm humbled by it. I'm thankful, and I'm honored to share, the stage with cats like you guys, and yeah. So,
Thank you, guys. All right, we'd like to take the last few minutes here to open it up to some question and answers. If anybody would like to ask some questions, now's your time.
I can use it. Yeah. Simon, I wanted to ask, the center in Africa, that was, that's your mother's home, correct? So at what point did that transition happen to when it was just your mother's home to then everybody was welcome to come in? Because obviously they could come in at any time, but there was a transition that happened to where it was called out to the community that this is your home now as well.
Thank you. That's a really good question. So, in that compound, that's where I was born and raised. And in 1997, from around 1993 to 97, Kisumu, my hometown had the highest HIV prevalence in the world. So most people that were dying out of HIV were from my hometown. And most of them were from my neighborhood because we had the biggest slum in that area. And so my mom worked in the local hospital, and she would see kids that she knew their parents, and she knew that they had passed away even before the neighborhood knew, because she worked at the hospital. And so, every Sunday after church, she brought together a group of nurses from the hospital. They cooked, and they invited these children who are now turning into not only parents at the age of like 12 and taking care of their siblings who are younger than them, but they were going out in the street to fend for themselves, And so this transition started happening without us knowing. So in 1997 is when it became official. That's when my mom registered Young Generation Center as an orphanage with the government. But by the time this was happening, these children that were being fed there every Sunday, some of them started spending the night because they felt cared for there. And so as their number increased, in that compound we had tenants. We had like one-room houses. In Africa, we are very creative. My bedroom here in Seattle is a house for like 6 people. You just subdivide it with a curtain, and you have your table, kitchen. And so we had about 80 people living in that compound. And we then turned each room into a classroom and a hostel. And then the big building that is there now, I built it from the ground up. That was my third project when I was the field director for that big NGO. They gave me money to build literally a toilet. And then I built the toilet within budget and, within the time that they expected it to be done. Then they gave us more money to build a dining hall. And this is us moving from, iron sheet structures that were falling apart, literally leaning on one side. Kids were going to class in a house that was like this. A house stand like that, but we didn't know how much dangerous it was, but that's all we had. And so this transition went on slowly, and by 97, it became an orphanage home. But then in 2013, my mom was working 24 hours a day. By 5 a.m., she was waking up all the kids. You have to clean up. You have to do something before you eat breakfast, including me. So us, we were the group of people that were providing for this group. We were going out working. That's why sometime here in Seattle, I hustle so hard that sometimes some of the guys that I'm mentoring ask me, when do you sleep? But I'm just used to this routine. And so in 2013, One Vibe took over the orphanage because we wanted my mom to retire. It was getting a toll on her, So we moved her to a rural area, and One Vibe began transitioning this place from an orphanage home to a creative hub because, my mom helped people become adults, and then from there, what were they going to do after they gained their education? So we are now giving them career paths, career opportunities, and we are building networks with people like Wael, people like Ricardo, that, Njuguna, that, and Zach, that people that are doing well that can then show them you can do it too.
That's awesome. Any other questions that we have? I think we have time for one more.
Thank you for the wonderful panel tonight. My question is for UL. I worked in the media industry back in Kenya, and one of the trends that we'd see was a lot of people who came in from either Europe or the USA would come in with their own crew, their own production lines and stuff. And I noticed in the documentary, 90% was local filmmakers, 90% of the music content came from the local artists. What was the process around that? How did you choose to take that decision, and what's the impact that you probably had as a takeaway from that? Yeah.
Thanks for the question. I know we only have like 4 minutes, but I'm gonna try to answer that as 2 minutes. Okay. So I got it. So logistically, the process was a bit challenging. After we made the decision that we're going to do the documentary, it was scaling up a crew in Kenya and understanding what the crew's equipment looked like, trying to make sure that it was going to work for the doc, making sure that the picture was going to be consistent. And so we knew a few people. Simon knew somebody specifically. His name was Simon. We call him Crucial. He connected us with a few folks. And so that crew was built while we were in Seattle. We had a few people like Brad Shepard, who was handling the drone operations. We had Zach, who came out, who did DIT and did other camera operations. But the majority of the crew was based in Kenya. And it was, as soon as we landed, it was like, all right, well, we have to go and make this film now, right? So it was a quick introduction. Before that, obviously, I got some content of theirs to understand what they were capable of. But when we were there, the person that I thought was going to be the DP, we started, which is a director of photography, main camera operator. we kind of like, after the first day, we switched to somebody else. And at that point, his name is Edward Martins. And then everything kind of just like aligned. And we had just a number of people there that you've been in contact with in some capacity that we just continue to develop more and more relationships with and trust. And we just had to be in the line of fire, right? And we just captured the content and just hope for the best. And then Sammer, who's a great editor, brought it all together and cut it up and cleaned it up. I'd like to continue that, but I know what we could do is outside, if you guys have any other further questions, we can hang out in the lobby, but they just have to get this room turned around for 7 p.m. For another screening. So we'll be out in the lobby and hang out and answer any continued questions you guys have. But, thank you so much for coming, for being a part of, just this screening and your energy. Thanks.